Make sure your sound is muted too, so sound and mic.
Yeah.
Or join without sound. Check. There goes, dude. There you are again. Oh, look, it's the regular Ina Schoenberg now.
The other one.
Okay. All right, hold on. I have us muted, so let's see if we fix the deal. So it looks good.
All right, so what I would, I'm gonna pull up a couple of documents, so that's that's where we are.
Share.
So I guess we could start, while I'm pulling up those documents, could we start by giving a quick summary of sort of where we are? Don has already, and that's what I'm gonna upload first, provided a draft of the Canopy section, and maybe that's the one we can discuss first. But while I'm pulling that up, JT, and then Kevin, perhaps you could both just provide the group and Derek an update on where things are.
Good. Want me to go?
Sure.
Yeah. So I've added a couple example sections to the overview document, admittedly not as much as I would have liked to, mostly focusing on the forest type stuff. And then I built in a new section that I would like to expand furthermore based on the feedback we got from the group meeting of something interactive, educational, more of a use tool guidance document. So I added a couple of paragraphs up to the front to just kind of be an overview statement of how do you go about doing active forest management? And that would be something that I think you and I should maybe review and collaborate together. It's just be better to have more than one forester write that section. Unfortunately, that's pretty near it. I've done a little bit more GIS mapping in the last couple of weeks. And we're rounding out pretty much the end of the hard work there. The rest of it will be organizing files, making maps. So that system is, I won't say built, but we're closing in on the data is getting collected.
Great. You wanna?
Sure, I can say a little bit while you're getting it ready.
Yeah.
Well, first I want to ask you, I could not access the Google Drive.
Okay,
It
I
asked
will
for permission,
I will
so if you-
resend that to you.
Because I wanted to look, it said there was something in there and I
You want me
couldn't
to
get it.
do it, Ina? Because I can do it.
That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I sent Ina the first draft of one of the three management plans so that we could talk about it today. What I want specifically, what we'll look at from the inventory is the charts and graphs. That is done and complete. The rest of the stuff has to be more what we're going to talk about. This is just a very rough, as you look at it, wasn't expecting anything, but I put it in one of the old templates that I use, or templates that so, and I tried to make it more in line with the town, but those are the things we need to talk about today. And then the other part, which I think comes from a lot of the meetings we've had, would be all the appendixes, how much are actually in the report and how much are in the appendix, such as forest health, climate resilience, fire protection. Soils report is actually done. I didn't think you guys wanted to see that 50 pages of stuff yet, but it'll be there. And this will be for each individual property as we go. And then about silviculture, invasive species, which is, I think, one of the more important things for individuals, not just the town, but individuals. And I'm actually gonna have, I can't remember his name, but I'm bringing somebody down to look around and he's gonna actually write because that's his profession. So I decided that that's better. I can look online, but I'd rather have that. And the theory is there that I'll go in order. Green Bee, there's some. The transfer station, there's a little bit more because there's more activity, but a lot of it is around the open areas where people work in activity. I'm gonna point at JW because the Hatch Cove is their lot and it's everywhere. And so that will be one that will be more. As the write-ups come, or at least when we talk about what we found, will be more probably realistic to townspeople and what they might find in their backyard. Because it would be, do we get rid of a plant or individual? So that one I'll spend a little more time. And that Wilson Museum, even though it's not gonna be a plan, we know there's the barberry. He's gonna look at that and try to help him with some. Would he, I mean, he's can't think of the name now. It's a spray license.
Oh, licensed pesticide.
Is a licensed applicator, so whether he would make comments on whether you would do that or you bulldoze or whatever, so I'm hoping to help, because it would be nice. So there's where we are, all of, obviously see Green Bee's here. Inventory work is done on transfer station, I have all the data, most of it's in similar charts and graphs, but I decided if we could talk about one, they're so similar and so close that we would be very close to what we wanted. The data is, the field work's done on Hatch Cove, but I haven't got the data back. It was done differently because I wanted it to be more representative of what you might get if somebody, I'm gonna point at you because I don't know who you are. Do you live in town?
I do, I'm just down from Greenby.
Okay, but so one of the things we heard at the thing was if you live in town, you probably don't own a forest, but you might have a backyard and might have questions about what's going on. So we did Hatch Cove as fixed radius plot, so we were inventorying everything and looking at invasives and everything that's there. So that if, I don't know if I can help you if you, for instance, have or worry about that, but I can show you, and his report will help you with, if we find this in our backyard, what might we do? So,
Be fantastic.
okay,
And
and that's where we're
perhaps,
at.
perhaps we could just do quick
Oh.
introductions. I'm sorry, your name again?
I'm Suzanne DeCourcy.
Great. And she's on the tree committee.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm Ina, I'm now Economic Development Director, and I've been working with the this Canopy initiative from the beginning.
I'm Kevin Allcroft, I'm a consulting forester.
John Harriman, Conservation Forester, Blue Hill Heritage Trust.
Bill
There's no-
Berman, arborist, forester, pesticide advocate.
Oh, sorry.
I'm Kenny, tree committee chair and town, tree warden.
Derek and I, town manager.
Okay, so we have all the participants in the meeting. Great, all right, I want to, have you given me the screen?
Yeah, it should be.
So
Just
why?
Host tools, you just gotta hit share screen.
Oh, share, okay, great.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna pull up first the status report outline. Here it is, okay, it's not super big, but so this is the overall status report outline. So we're doing Bill, just and
Suzanne.
Suzanne, as background, JW is producing 3 discrete forest management plans, but kind of oriented toward.
Kevin is.
I'm doing
Kevin,
that, that's right.
sorry, Kevin, is doing 3 discrete forest management plans for specific lots that that will tell us what's on that lot and make there'll be some findings and some recommendations, and the forest management plans will be put together based on standard practices during Maine Forest Service and the, what's the name of that other group, the
NRCS.
NRCS, Natural Resource
Conservation.
Service. So that's what's going on with that. And we're doing overview report. It's kind of not exactly a traditional forest management plan for the whole town, because it's much more of a 35,000 foot look at things, what we've got. And it is incorporating information and findings and recommendations from the discrete forest management plans, as well as a whole chapter on the village canopy and the good work that Bill Berman has been doing. And we hope that Caleb from Maine Coast Heritage Trust will be giving us an annex that will describe the Maine Coast Heritage Trust's approaches to managing Witherley Woods, because there are 7 different easements with different rules and restrictions. And they already do a fair amount of things there, and they have different levels of intervention and intervention based on those easements. We are planning on presenting our findings and recommendations out of all this review work in a public meeting on August 5th that will allow townsfolk to learn more about what we're doing, react to the findings and recommendations. We'll tweak the reports, and we will wrap up at the end of August, early September. And there's no specific commitments on the part of the trust organizations to do something specific, but my hope is that we are coming up with recommendations that are, at least there is a pathway to addressing them in some modest way. And so specifically with the site-specific plans, our idea was to take very small area and identify how that space might be demonstration, might serve as a demonstration space for either a forest management approach that is active or necessary, or the lack of an approach, or like not doing some. What happens if you don't do X, Y, or Z? And that over the next 10 years, over the comprehensive plan period, we are monitoring in some way these specific sites, as well as raising awareness across townsfolk and landowners on things that they might do, how to better understand what's on their land, how to think about being a better steward of what they've got, based on their financial ability and their objectives and all that kind of stuff. We're not telling anybody what to do, but we are going to be sort of able to use our public wooded spaces as to raise awareness and advocate for better practices to help promote healthy and resilient forests across Castine in whatever modest way we can. So that's the objective. So with that, we could go into, I'm going to ask if there's any questions or clarifications.
Is
First.
this in the Google Drive?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so once I can see that, I'll be able to see it from home.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is the outline of the overview report. So a bit of background, some of the standard things that we look at, but again, higher level viewpoint. We already have some details put in here by JW on current forest conditions. A little bit about the types of forests that we've got, and we've talked about how to get more information together and then in on overall wildlife and ecological significance. We have a very fleshed out section on vernal pools, which is exemplary of the kind of detail that we'll find in the rest of the report. And I'm scrolling down now to the town canopy review and documentation. Don very helpfully has laid out some background on what the history of what we've done, the kind of record keeping that the tree committee maintains with the support of Bill Berman, a description of the disease issues and preventative treatment. I don't know whether we'll want to add some detail there, but let's see how long, in terms of how much lately, how much is projected. There's a little bit of information about replanting. This is minor editorial, not content stuff. Just to kind of keep it all in the same viewpoint and for conciseness in a couple places. Don talks about the costs and the fundraising, and one of the things that we've agreed to in the grant is to will describe here an approach to and what a woodlands management ordinance might look like. And the discussion that we had earlier with the select board on this is that the idea and the main requirement is not to necessarily, provide a prescriptive ordinance that landowners must follow, but more that we simply we need an ordinance that identifies what body within town will follow up on the recommendations, perhaps in this report, and that has longer term responsibility for looking at and understanding just sort of woodlands overall, not just isolated to the important village tree canopy. So we have to do that. What I don't see here, and what perhaps you, Bill and Don, have some, and maybe Suzanne, thank you, have some recommendations that you might think about off the top of your head, but then could reflect a little more and put a section in here on what your recommendations are vis-a-vis the village tree canopy. Beyond, like, I know that you want to raise money, right? And we've talked about costs, but and there is a place here where you talk a little bit about your choices on tree planting and so forth. But are there other issues that you think should be followed up on? We're putting a big emphasis, for example, on invasives in some of the other areas. Maybe, I don't know if you think it would be a good idea to speak to that, or other pests and diseases that that we need to be monitoring for. Should we have a citizens science kind of monitoring group that looks at and identifies where there are issues? And from what you've learned in working with the village canopy, are there things more focused on the monitoring of tree health that should perhaps be added or instituted, or could be taken up by a citizen group in other parts of town as well? So I'll pause there, and I know that's a lot, but I wanted to give you the overview. And first, see if you have any questions or clarifications on this broad approach.
Well, just starting this, our mission, based on the Castine tree ordinance.
Mhm.
It is the elm tree ordinance, it's focused on the elms.
Of course.
That was why it was created, and
Yep.
that's why the committee was created, and
Yep.
that's how we get Trees of the USA status, yada, yada.
All of that
good
stuff,
stuff.
all that good stuff.
Our effort is currently to take as good care of our elms as we can. We are experiencing Dutch elm disease here and there in private trees. They have, as far as we know, yet to affect any of the treated trees. But beyond taking care of our elms, we want to do sensible replanting and not create another monoculture. I know I noted it here in my report back in 2000 and 2004, there were two major replanting events that happened with 75 trees or so around town that were quote disease resistant. And that was when Joe Slocum was town manager, and I have talked with him, and there are no records as to what variety they were until Aaron found an invoice. And a couple of people in town remembered that they were Liberty. And Liberty is a unique cultivar that is a multi-clone of six different clones, because of the labeling issues got screwed up in the lab and yada yada. And they determined that only one of those six was truly disease resistant. And we don't know which ones we got. One of those record keeping things, not the problem. And we know generally where they all are. They're all in town, they're in Court Street, various other locations. And since then, we have planted some, mostly Princeton and Valley Forge, and that's what I have mentioned here,
yeah.
and where they are, generally where they are. They're too young to tag right now, so I just try to know where they are and in front of whose house they are, that type of thing. There is one, I heard a person down on Perkins Street planted a St. Croix. There's a mixed bag along the golf course. There's several Princetons which are looking very good and they've done very well. And there are other valley forges, and you can tell the difference instantly by the way their canopy grows. They're very different looking trees. The Princetons are kind of tall, oval, and the valley forges tend to splay out at the top like this. It's very good what they are. So we want to put a brake on more elm trees. Charlie came down the street, lost two of his big beautiful ones, and he was very sad to see them go. He had more than anybody else in Castine. He had like 4 or 5 in front of his house. And he lost 2, and it was tragic, but he said, I'm planting more elms. And I said, Charlie, talk to me first. Let's talk about this. But the next thing I knew, 3 Princeton elms, bam, 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 right in front of his house. And he's an old guy and it makes him happy, and I'm okay. Let's let that one go.
Yeah.
You know?
So
So-
you've, yeah,
The future is to determine what species we can plant and expect success based on incoming diseases. We're aware of a lot of trees that won't make it in the long term. There's an oak leaf wilt that is affecting Long Island and parts of New York State. There was a seminar that the DACF gave. It was very informative by the head forester for the state of New York. So we're concerned about what can we plant and expect success. Are we throwing our money into a pit and not gonna get anything out of it? Also location, where should we plant? There are some open spaces that we've identified. But not terribly many. Those are the 2 issues we're working on.
yeah,
And it's all streetscape based.
yeah. So, that's a very helpful summary. Do you guys have any questions or comments about what else we might want to have some recommendations from, like from Bill, based on the experience in working with the streetscape and or from what you are finding in the field that we should be paying more attention to in town, because we are.
I'm thinking the field work these guys are doing and the canopy in the town, other than the streetscape, precious trees go together. I mean.
It does.
They're gonna go together.
Yeah, it dovetails, but I feel that there might be some more we want to speak to beyond what trees should be replanted. It's a really important question.
Yeah.
And are there other questions?
I got a question. So when we pick these trees for our streetscapes, of course, my first concern is always like, okay, durability, resilient, so they're not knocking out power lines constantly or even when CMP or whoever butchers the trees, so there's half of it here, half of the line running through. Right, so when we look at that, we know like there's climate change issues and things like that. For resiliency, we get more ice storms or we get these weird heavy snowstorms of just heavy wet snow. That whatever we're planting has got a long life. Like in Bucksport, they wiped out all their elms, they put in silver maples, they grew fast, they grew big, and now they're shedding their branches and falling on people's lawns and yards. Over across from where the mill was, up, I forget that Bagwell Avenue, and that whole area has huge silver elms, and they're a nuisance for the town now because they're coming down over time. Cause they're just not resilient, or they're at the end of their life, maybe, I don't know what it was exactly.
They're not a long lived.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was a good idea, cause they're one of those canopies to get back there quick, but now they're regretting that decision.
You get shade trees back quickly, then they don't last forever.
Right. So, for example, I think it would be great to expand this paragraph to talk about some of the criteria that you're thinking about in your head, but this is not only describing what you are doing for the streetscape, but it is also will help people think about what they should put, homeowners think about what they should put in their yards and what they should not, and where they should put them. They might consult with you or they might not. And so laying some of this out a little bit more clearly, this is intended to be the basis of some very brief advocacy, like info sheets.
Education part.
Yeah, exactly. So, so it'd be helpful to add some of the things that you think about, like what Derek just pointed out. Do you have some other comments or thoughts?
No, I'm gonna say this though, I like the idea of changing. I mean, the elms have been the big thing here, and I think we talked about this last time a little bit, it's the right thing. I look up and species that you show there, but I'm nervous of white oak. I love the idea of white oak, except if it's a tree with a sidewalk. Because they drop acorns, and I've been in cities that kind of goes back to what you're saying, that as much as I would love to see a white oak for what it is, you don't want it in a tree that's on the sidewalk out here, because it shoots acorns, and as it gets bigger, then people trip on acorns because they don't go clean them up.
That is a red
Yeah.
flag.
Yeah.
It is a red flag. It's a beautiful tree. It might be on the edge of the golf course where there's no sidewalk, a thing that would work, but not there. So I just wanted to point that out. You guys seem to have a pretty good handle on that.
Yeah.
I don't know much more about, well, I know a lot about trees, but what you're trying to do is different. I don't know where you've looked. You have an advisor who I've known. Bill and I were in school together, or close. I've known him for a long time. So I would trust on that. But I did some work in the city of Portland. And I will just say this for you to look at. Literally, you can go on and they map every tree they've ever planted. It's on a map, and you can click on the tree, it'll tell you the species and the date it was planted. And the only thing I'm saying about that is they probably have a hired person, but it might give you some other species idea that you may not have thought of. That I was quite surprised. I was shocked about the whole thing. I think it's available to the public, but it might give, and they do different things in different locations. I don't know why. I didn't have to get into that part.
Yeah.
But where I was, they're like, yeah, go look at this, and literally you click on the dot that's on.
Where
the
do I find that?
I think if you just go on the city of Portland and look at their mapping, it's one of those online kind of things.
Okay.
If you struggle with it, send me a thing and I'll see if I could dig it out for you. But I was shocked, and it's very much what you're doing here. But it was, because it was online, it's open to the public. And then I was like any forester, I'm like, ooh, what's that tree? What's that over there? Then I got lost in this dark black hole of not knowing. But it was interesting that they listed that. Might give you some other ideas. Maybe it'll give you guys someone else to talk to. Maybe you call the guy up and say, why do you choose these trees for where you put them? Because that's really what you're looking for, right? So.
And this, Derek, is a nice, like, evidence-based, data-driven reason and request for the town to purchase some GIS software that's capable and necessary training that's capable of pulling in our LiDAR data, pulling in the stand types and the information, putting the map on that that your wall map, and putting that data in the way that we've got it, and perhaps getting, I'm going to be talking with and I'll be setting up a table over at MMA in September on their like community engagement day, and maybe we can talk to professors and see if we can get some student help to set something like this up and start feeding in data, because like you've got reasons to use it for, the water.
I do it for
Yeah, for
measuring, I do it for all kinds of things. I do it so I don't have to look at somebody's sidewalk out there, sometimes because of the good mapping and stuff like that Google provides, and satellite imagery and everything else, just.
So that could be a
every day I steal buck sports, to tour Castine, but I don't have my overlay data,
Exactly.
so that's the only problem.
Yeah, so we want to, that's a really helpful.
But I'm probably looking at, we're not gonna have necessarily the ability to update as much as just load over all these maps of resources into that.
We've also worked.
Like people creating them, and then we can have them put into the GIS, so we don't have to manage it constantly.
Right.
We'll have, I forget the company, they're the same ones that do our tax maps, that do it for all of it. I think it's based on Access GIS or something like that, so.
But speaking as definitely not a master, but a dabbling everyday general practitioner, you build a database that then is your internal database. You can upload, edit, and do all those data shares in that system to the point like for Dawn, I know you love your paper maps. And you absolutely love your paper.
That's all I have.
But you can
That's all I have.
but you can build that paper map in a system in the town's GIS layer that has all the data that's in your mind or in paper, built right into the layers
Yeah.
themselves. That's the real power of it. It's like, oh, click on that tree and you can have the last 6 times build an herbicide application down to the day.
Yeah.
On instant recall.
We do that. We do that
Yeah,
on our database. We have, it's, Henry
I know.
Jackson created a front end for all the trees.
Gotcha.
So we have a little, and a GIS map or a GPS map.
Yeah.
Where the tree is.
yeah, so
And
integrating.
so that's the key with the whole thing with the GIS is being able to do that. Actually looking at some aerial photos, looking at some overlays of like zones or whatever other data there is, floodplain areas, aquifers, you know, you get it all and you start isolating soil type maps, whatever, and you start going, oh, geez, that would be a good location because this tree would thrive in that type of soil and stuff like that. But it's just endless what you can do, you know, and I just see all these maps and overlays that like in our comp plan even that they're this big, and that's what I was talking about. It'd be nice to have them on Mylar size, but even better, it'd be nice to just be able to click on them and start overlaying and pinpointing and using that data and working that data.
Let me just add, just be really clear that I'll go to soils because you will get a soils map here. The soils map that I provide is based national. Even though I did your map, can't get that specific about it and
Oh,
go,
you
hey,
can't,
I see that, and
okay,
I'll
okay.
show you, I didn't bring it today, but the great example on the back, I don't think we have a map that we can show up, but you know where Greenby and the transfer, there's a wetland out back.
Yeah,
Well, they mistyped it on the national. Now, I can't change the national database, so this is what you're gonna get, because that's what's out
Right.
there. But I wanted you to understand,
right.
that's the
Sometimes
thing
they're
of
not
these
perfect.
big overlays. This is a national, but
Right,
even a main level one, I could show you property lines that are wrong.
yeah,
So it's a catch-22. I think it's the right direction, but you gotta be really cautious about using.
Right.
Because of what the quality of where everything may or may not be, especially individual property boundaries.
yeah, well,
You know how
that's
that
always-
works, yeah, that's a
right.
separate story.
I always
but-
say that these are for surveying.
No, there's,
purposes.
unless everybody's was surveyed, then it is what it is. But the soils is a good example. It's a very generalized thing and it will help, but it won't solve that. And when you see it someday, I'll point out what I'm talking
Yeah.
about. But essentially, the wetland, they mistyped it.
Yeah,
But because they typed it at such a large level, and I saw it, and I'm like, what am I gonna do? I either hand draw you a map? No, you're gonna get the map, it's gonna say it came from this level.
Right.
I can't spend any more time trying to fix a soils map.
right, yeah,
So,
Yeah, I don't remember
Yeah.
what USGS, their minimum pixel size is. When you're on their website, they tell you, and
Oh, yeah.
it's large.
and that's what people forget. So,
and I don't even know when they created those, but I bet they're really old.
well, it depends on which, like in the soils you're talking about, yeah,
Yeah.
it depends on which county you were in. I'd have to go really dig down in, but yeah, you're right.
Right,
Everyone was different.
cause I remember even back my first town of us having an old soils map that.
The old book that unfolded.
And like, so for septic systems or anything else, that's what they would operate, and then my code or my plumbing secretary, those soils aren't even close to that, they're not gonna be able to get a septic system in that spot, you know, whatever.
Yep.
So I, with respect to Bill's time here.
Yes, so I would like to, I'd like to move on to any comments that you and questions that you have. But I also, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the interface with the Canopy information, but also then have Kevin just show us, including Bill, very quickly, a little bit of, here's what we got, because it would be good to run through that as well. So the floor is yours.
So, you know, a lot of the stuff that we've been kind of talking about here, a little bit of it's a moving target. Of course, we're talking about replanting and, you know, infrastructure, which you mentioned, and that's probably the biggest thing that I see as a problem to coming up with, replanting plan or a suggestion for people as to what to plant, it's what's in the ground, what's in the air for infrastructure, and, how are these trees gonna be affected in the future. It is in a spot that you can count on growing a tree for, let's say, maybe 100 years without entering the root system repetitively, for streets, sewer lines. Every sewer line plugs and breaks eventually. If you have underground power or underground gas, which I don't think we have here, but, there's underground power here, all of that needs to be, maintained over time. And then overhead as well, plus, your streets are gonna get expanded, redone, sidewalks, all that stuff matters a lot. And over time, that's a lot of decent trees that I've seen come down have been from those, those are, it's conflict or, loss of quality of a tree that had a decent shot. So you grow a 100-year tree to 30 and then you cut it down and it's on top of sewer. And that's kind of probably the biggest thing that I can think of, on the planning side, anything, figuring out where and then worry about what you're gonna plant later. And that change is different this year than it was last year. And it's gonna change more in the future, for sure, because new diseases, and climate changes, whatever.
What do you think about the oak wilt issue? Like, how worried, I mean, it's one thing to keep an eye on, but does that mean we never plant oaks? I mean.
No, I wouldn't say that. I've worked around
Yeah,
Oakville in
Yeah.
the Midwest, and they had it. It was a problem. Like Dutch elm, it was isolated. And they had a lot of oak trees.
mhm.
So
So,
there's my experience. They've had oak wilt out there for a long time, so, it didn't seem to be a debilitating problem. So, if you had a stand that had oak wilt in it, you pretty much needed to cut that to isolate, get rid of the root contact.
is that mostly like a root transmitted or a fungal, air fungal, or insect vector?
So I didn't work with, any of the real treatment for it.
Yeah.
So I'm not exactly sure, but the biggest thing seemed to be that, once established was to break root contact. That was the thinking at the time, which is, a little while ago. I haven't been out there for a while. But, that was.
What I recall in the seminar, I zoomed in on, stated it's a fungal disease that progresses very rapidly on root contact is involved in that whole. But it's capable of killing an oak tree in 6 weeks. Really quick.
Yeah, I think I saw that happen in my old neighborhood in Maryland.
Yeah, it's quick and kind of, it's a patch.
Yeah.
A patch of trees and you but you don't see, or, man, this is 40-year-old infant, I haven't dealt with it since, but you didn't see, another one over here getting it and another one over there. You treat it.
It's a neighborhood.
But it's treated exactly the same way you treat Dutch elm.
Yeah. Okay.
And probably, root contact, and eliminate the use of any treatment.
So, what do you think about invasives in town? I know it's not specific to elm tree health, but
So
do you have a perspective?
all kinds of invasives down here.
Yeah.
This place is loaded with them, just because a lot of the land's been cleared. So a couple thoughts I have on that. We treat a lot of invasives in other places. We haven't done. We've done a bit here. Some chemicals, some mechanical. But if you don't have a plan for after, then it's not worth doing. Period. There's just, we've done a lot of jobs in the past where It's like, you know, you go in, you wipe it out, you're pretty successful, then you turn around and leave. And there's really no point in doing that, because they just come back.
And when you say a plan, would that plan be, recurrent spot treatment as they return, or what's?
More than that, you need to do something, cultural, it could be just turning it into grass and mowing, whatever.
Mhm.
That's cultural and mechanical, I guess, but, if you wipe them out, the condition's gonna be almost exactly the same as when they were recruited there,
Mhm.
so it isn't gonna do too much.
So just to clarify, as a short list. Replant natives, continued monitoring. We're gonna rely on natural regeneration, so. It's already present on site and we expect it will recruit in a new gap, something to that effect.
Right, so, right, but it's gotta be quick, because invasives are quick.
Right.
And, you know, they have the ability to hold the site for a long time. The other thought on that is that, a full canopy gets rid of most of them.
Mm.
You know, very few of those.
Start with patch.
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest thing is getting.
Yeah.
I think long term is turning it into something else that you maintain, like with lawnmower, or turning it back into forest with it. That will eliminate the problem over time.
Mhm.
This place is barbaric,
Yeah,
like no place else.
That's the.
Multiflora rose is that's spreading all over everywhere. There's a lot of it down here.
Yeah.
It's pretty easy to kill, but it comes back.
Right, so, yeah.
And, knotweed, you got a fair bit of that in town. And the other thing with invasives, if you're gonna go the chemical route, which, that's pretty much a part of every firm program, is that, property lines make a big difference, cause if, property owner A wants the invasives gone, property owner B is absolutely against chemical application, then, you gotta really rethink what you gotta do.
Yeah.
It's just gonna,
Keep.
right, you're not gonna get rid of the whole standard knotweed if this property line goes through the middle of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Bittersweet, down.
Yeah.
yeah,
And all this stuff, a lot of it, I think that we're gonna end up having to learn to live with. Just cause it's on such a scale.
Maintain it.
Yeah.
So I wanna ask a question, because in the overview report, like, we can't list and describe every single one. That has an effect in Castine. My general thought was to pick a list of 10 to 8 that are the most common, easy to identify. Some of the quote unquote, in my mind, what I call them forest killers. To outline in the report as an educational piece. If you had to make some suggestions for that list, what would you have?
Well, for down here, bittersweet would be one,
Bittersweet.
Barbarian
barberry, absolutely down here,
looking.
multiflora rose, knotweed,
We found it out, I'm just looking through the cruise notes, I
Yes.
didn't find it, but I'm curious what your
buckthorn
thought is.
it's terrible, there are two species.
Yeah, that's this gloss, we found both common glosses.
So,
Which?
Poppy the buckthorn.
Buckthorn.
both I think are
Yes.
considered invasive, but it's, common as thorn, correct?
Right, I think it is.
They're both listed at the state level as category 1 severely invasive
But I
widespread.
think it's the glossy buckthorn that really takes over
Yeah,
in just in my experience. And I see there, it is here, but I don't see it like it is up around, along the interstate.
Yeah,
If you get up Orono area, it's just loaded.
true. Yeah, we have it in Bangor Land Trust, so, I didn't mean to interrupt you, so keep going.
No, that would be, you pretty well covered it. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a huge.
just 5, but.
Yeah, the other ones I was considering throwing in is there's a grass species that I don't know a lot about. Some others that I need to help out about, that are, I think, are becoming more common, and one I recently learned is incredibly invasive that I don't think a lot of people are aware of is, rugosa rose. those beautiful little pink rose flowers we all associate in coastal Maine. I did not
That's
realize that
invasive.
it was incredibly invasive.
New stuff on
Just because people like them, they.
Right, they're all pretty ones.
Nobody likes barberry.
But you pretty much hit the big offenders that I was planning on.
Yeah, I mean, there's stuff on that, you know, black locust is on the list.
Yeah,
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna profile black, I was gonna make a comment of black locust, but
You know, I don't think that.
Right, because we saw that, but no, those are less so than.
I've seen a couple places where it's like, wow, that really didn't go the way anyone thought it was, it's black locust thicket now.
Yeah, true, but you know, it's a tree that's resistant.
Yeah.
To most everything you can. Well, I can sell every bit of that.
Yeah.
That I can get, you know,
And
I don't know.
there are nitrogen.
Right, yeah, it's good wood,
Yes.
I guess that's the, you know, Norway maple, I guess would be the other thing, but
We're laughing because everything we just named is on Hatch Cove, including the Norway maple.
How about burning bush? I remember back when I was in college, we planted so much burning bush. Like at from Sprague's Nursery, along highways, around the little parking lot strips, we put them everywhere. Everybody wanted those because of the red.
fall, they're pretty in the fall.
Right.
So it spreads, but I've never seen it actually be debilitating.
Okay,
Problem, you know, I've seen places where there's escape.
Right.
yeah,
On this, and
It's
it's.
a long story.
So it is.
I've seen it as a debilitating problem.
you have,
It's, you go over to the Kennebec region, like KLT, there's been a couple of land trusts that I know that have areas that they're basically like, yeah, there's a trail through it now, we're not doing anything anymore, because from one side of the boundary line to the other side of the boundary line is burning bush.
right.
Yeah, I guess honeysuckle would be.
Oh, yeah.
That's probably should be on the list.
Yeah.
Is that the honeysuckle bush?
Yeah.
Yeah, where I used to live, there was disaster so much.
Yeah.
Um,
That helps.
Yeah,
And-
that's pretty much the list.
and, you know, I mean, I don't think that we're under any illusions that by, you know, that we're gonna remove all the invasives in the 7.5,
So.
you know, acres of Castine, or that we're gonna, but
1989.
But if we can get people to start paying more attention to what's on their properties and maybe slowing the spread by addressing patches and visible areas, and people see their neighbors working on certain things, and we have a town initiative that works on the sides of the roads, and you know, that we start to provide an example and give the things that we want to encourage a little bit more space, a little bit more, and the land itself a little bit more time to adapt, and you know. And if people care about their spaces and what's growing on it, it helps them to be more invested and pay attention to bigger picture issues as well. So that's a little bit kind of the, I think, incentive of why we want to try and push some stuff forward coming out of this.
They're educational documents at the end.
Yeah.
Right, so I'll say this now, so it's Ron Lemon that I've talked to, you know,
Yeah,
it doesn't. So I'll explain what I'm trying to do here, because we gotta be really cautious, we don't repeat the same thing at your level and then at the individual. So what my point is on the individual management plans, the three of them, and the little bit of work I'm gonna do at the museum.
Yeah.
What did we see? And this isn't 100% inclusive, but what did we pick up during inventory? And then Ron is gonna help with, how can it be treated at a low level, meaning in somebody's backyard? Or at a larger level, like if you hire Bill to come in and do it or something like that. That's all I asked him to do, because I didn't want any more, but my hope was kind of what you described right there. Somebody comes to this and they're like, hey, I have that knotweed in my backyard, and we'll pretend it's just a small patch just getting started. This will give them some ideas, or at least who to talk to Bill, talk to Ron, or maybe, I don't even know if he'll include, like, here's some options to get rid of it. But that's all I asked him to do. I don't want any more. Hope that's not stepping on your feet. You're hired by them, but I'm working on him with 2 other projects, and I'm like, I don't wanna have to write about invasives. That's not my strength. So that's why I chose to go that way. So does that make sense? That's no bother to you as I really expect in the end, I don't think he wants to, kind of like me, sort of retiring, he's evening out. He doesn't mind writing it, but I don't think he's gonna want people calling him up and going, hey, will you come down and do our trees? He may or may not, I have no idea if that makes sense, so.
Okay,
That's where we got with that. I just wanted him,
So Ron would,
but I don't know what his deal is now. He's
he's left,
he left, right.
right, but he's still
Still doing stuff.
pretty active.
Okay, well, I'll leave that, we'll figure that out later. We're not hiring him for a job. I just wanted someone with the credentials to be the one that talks about that. I
Okay.
mean, yeah, you can look it up all online. I don't be the one to say that. I'll talk about the trees. We need to cut them. I'll talk about that. But that's really, I'm the forester and that's not my specialty.
yeah, no, thank you for bringing in that extra expertise, and I mean, I hope that we can give him. The other people who you've talked with, and we can give them credit also.
Oh, no, I will. I realize that.
For just
everybody
just
credit here, but this is-
doodle acknowledgements.
Yeah, we'll get to that point at some point. This was just.
Ron full name, Ron who?
Ron
Ron Lemon.
Lemon, Lemin is I think how you spell it. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah, no,
That's right.
Yeah.
So I'm pulling up your specific
Okay.
report. What would you like to show us?
So
And
let's
again, I think
start
it'd be helpful
with, can you make that bigger or no?
A little
A little bit.
bit,
So let's
but
just
not
start,
much.
let's
When
not
it
get
might
all,
to a place, I
all right,
can,
let's go page 4.
okay,
This is quickly for right there, just that chart.
yeah.
I don't have the map. There you go. So this is where we're starting. This is what we found when we're out there. We're looking at 40 acres of forested land.
Do you wanna come?
We also have 3 in a little bit, and I'll explain why I do it this way, because I'm not a GIS specialist. Somebody else could get out there and really map these out. But we have the field with the little parking spot out front. We have the trail that goes through it, and then around the just over 3 acres of wetland in the back. And eventually you'll see a map to see how that works. And then I used 40 acres of forest. Now, we did not have the option to what I call pre-type. So what we did was we gridded, and this will show up in the report. We just took it and laid a grid evenly spaced. So we ended up with plots scattered about, and then we kind of backfilled into what they would be. And it turned out, you can see 20 acres or half of it softwood, 15 acres in mixed wood, and 5 acres of hardwood, meaning that. So that's just a simple overview of what the way we used it on it as we do forest management for people to understand. If you just go to the next page. So the owner's objectives, this is really nothing. This is just me pandering around. This is not set in, this is nothing, because really this is a town thing. But I realized that. So we have a trail out there that's a fantastic, beautiful trail, goes through a beautiful forest, and Blue Hill manages it, right? But that essentially, I don't know what your agreement is, but I'm pointing at DW, but the trail out there. So right now, currently, that would be the most of what's going on. Wildlife, everybody likes, so these are just very general things. Then later on, so these are things I think, or I'm sorry, Derek, to think about. I don't know what the town wants, but eventually when we get to a final, we're gonna have to narrow it down and maybe in the order of what the town might want. I realize talking to you as the town, but the town is everybody, and that makes it really hard. I've done this before, and just as an instance, for me, I did a job that the client was the parents originally 30 years ago. And then they gave it 10 years after that to their 3 daughters, who now have given it to 17 grandchildren.
Oh my God.
So I know what it's like, and so I don't know what what's the town population down here, 1,000?
Right, well,
Whatever, so 17 is not easy to work with, but you can understand, I don't know what it will be, and that's where as a
So-
group we need to get.
Yes, and that is why, that my like concern, why we're starting to talk about recommendations. But, and again, the objectives and the recommendations are gonna kind of.
But that's why this is really.
So-
And so the process is that we come up with some statements of objectives. We come up with some findings and recommendations. We present them on August 5th.
Yeah.
To a town,
Hopefully some towns.
some townspeople. And we had small numbers, we had small numbers, but we had good, solid feedback on the original consultation in March. And, I think that generally priorities are gonna be mostly in sync with that original layout. But so
So can I just say
Yes.
one minute? So if I was walking in, Don's been here for a long time, so he
Okay.
could say, Derek, you're crazy. But if I had, I know. If I was thinking, I'm thinking all the way back to Sangerville, we had our forested land that was dated back to the Civil War. It was federal government, they grew those trees for wood for war or something back then, and we got it for some reason. I think there's 2 40-acre parcels. Thinking back then, trails weren't a big thing, that I know that we would harvest it for the red pine poles and sell them to CNP or whatever. And I know we talked about, there's some mature trees there that are gonna go by and everything else. If I had my choice for a forested piece of land, we're just looking at it, putting it to work for the people, I'd be like, okay, we need trails, but also we should probably do some type of forestry management plan, get a little revenue off those trees before they go bad or whatever, and then and maybe I would think, okay, so when we do it, we'd want to do responsible forestry type thing, whether it's selective cutting, whether or not it's clearing a patch or replanting. That would be my dream way to manage a piece of land like this, because it's recreational, it's giving a little revenue to, get put back into that, or and also an educational area for people to learn, oh, this is what I should be doing on my property to properly manage it and make sure it regenerates into whatever it needs to be.
Good, that's fair, that's.
And what we've talked about is that like the town is not gonna have a lot of money to pay for, to subsidize tree removal and,
Right.
sale, and that they're small. They're still, even though it's, okay, 40 acres, but the part that you might
Well, you can't operate.
take out would just be a small portion of that. And it's hard to even recover your costs in doing so. But again,
If it's got value, somebody will cut it.
Well, and-
You're just gonna get stumpage anyways. So.
yeah, or maybe the woodsman, maybe there's a really small patch within the 1 acre designation that we wanted to create the demonstration lots. Maybe in that one spot, we get the MMA Woodsman's Club, and we get somebody who actually knows how to take down trees, take down a few, and we get,
Okay.
there might be ways to demonstrate. Anyway, please.
Okay, no, that's good.
Yeah.
So I didn't put the map in, but I'm gonna turn this around, I can pass it around, I'm just gonna turn it, this is gonna help as we go. So, I don't, everybody's been out there, right, you all know, so we're talking about the north side of the two there,
Yeah, I mean, Bill's the one who, I don't know if knows what lot we're talking
So we're-
about.
Oh, I agree.
I
You're
figured,
really
yeah,
okay.
so, and the reason, and I think you'll understand what I'm saying, is, so, for what you said and what we talked about before we get onto the numbers. I did not identify this line that divides the two. Now, realizing these are owned both by the town, this is less important.
Mhm.
But this, if I was here and you were the only owner, this would be our biggest problem from what you just said.
Mm.
Even though you might have a field we could operate in, but because of this line, I don't know. We didn't see it. Did you ever see it when you were
I'm
out?
trying to rack my brain right now, I don't think.
You mean where the trees ablaze or anything?
Well, I don't know, we didn't
Right.
identify, it's out by the field, you can find the old stone wall. And what I'm pointing out here as we move to the numbers is that you're in a unique position maybe to do what you talked about. For one reason, we don't so much care about that middle line because you own both sides, so that's important to know, but that does not work for a private person, if somebody only owned lot one. And didn't own lot to the south, then suddenly probably can't do it at a no cost option.
Yeah.
But because we don't maybe have to worry about that as a separate issue, secondly, you have a wood yard already there. I mean, we can move wood if you choose to do a small scale operation in behind the transfer station. It looks like you do firewood work out there,
Yeah, we have a
but
wood
you
yard.
have space. So
Right.
you could do something small scale. I'm saying this here, and the report will try to describe this on that. That doesn't work if person only owns map 8 lot 1, because they don't own that field, or the open area where you.
Yeah,
could
but in
figure
our
out-
instance, we own both, so.
But you own them both, so that takes a lot out, so there's that.
And I don't know what the green bee easement or whatever, whenever we got it, what it said.
No,
So maybe they
I'll
said
read that
you're
as
never
something.
allowed to cut a tree down.
We'll look at that, but you're right, but
Right.
to start.
I don't
with
want to
this,
do that, and then all of a sudden go,
Well,
the easements.
I'd have to pull,
Yeah.
I'd have to pull the easement, I would be shocked if it said that, Derek, but.
Yeah.
I would also be shocked if it didn't address that, so.
right,
There's probably a gray zone in the middle there, well, there won't be a gray zone, I found for these VHHTs, I've been very impressed, they seem to have been. As long ago as they were written, they seem to have been clear, restrictive, but not overly restrictive.
yeah.
So I'd say there'd probably be a middle ground somewhere in there, without naming names. I had 2 or 3 easement inspections on 2 different landowners this winter. Who were actively doing cutting inside a conservation easement that we held with no problems. But again, I'd have to pull your specific easement, which I don't have memorized.
Cause to me, it just comes down to properly managing that land, but also maximizing the types of benefits we get out of it, like recreation.
Well, you already have the recreation, so you don't wanna
Right.
screw up what you have.
Right.
I agree, and at some point in my notes, I gotta read the easement. It's probably officially online, or do you know?
Yeah, they get recorded.
So it's recorded, so I
I
can
mean,
push that way.
when I cut a bunch of land down, so I was actually amazed at what went into like a forestry operation of selective cutting and everything else.
Yeah.
Like the twitch trails, the I mean, the crossings. Yeah, I'm so glad that started at the beginning of my career because it was really cool. So like when I watch Axemen, I'd be like, oh, this is so exciting, you know, I'm watching them use the horses. I know, crazy,
Great, so
right?
what do you wanna say about this chart?
All right, so this is, so we'll go through the charts quickly so you can see, this was after inventory, this is what we saw. I guess the big thing to point out to the town, if you read from the bottom up, if you can read it, red spruce saw logs, 57% of the softwood stand volume, which is actually too much. And a lot of those are, we can get to the thing, but some almost over mature. You did all of the actual cruising there, but the inventory, so I want to point that out, but if you look at the second most option, culls. So that doesn't normally, now normally I would split it out, but I chose here in this situation not to. I wanted the culls, which I have in my notes somewhere, it's okay. So there's red spruce, white pine, yellow birch, balsam fir, and red maple were tallied as culls, which is essentially the species mix, but it's a big number, but you really can't do anything with that. So I'm going back to now is maybe what you would or wouldn't manage. And then you have red spruce pulpwood. So red spruce is really the dominant, as anybody that ever walked out there on the trail might, you don't even have to be a forester maybe to get that because the trees are big and they're beautiful. But to go into what you said, ideally, you can't tell from this exactly, but what would you do? You want to reduce the red spruce. Everything else is pretty much in line. And essentially, you would have to figure out, how much do you want to do? And I'm saying this really cautiously in the beginning. So the spruce stands, we don't have the maps all here, but there's 2 big, I'm gonna turn it around again, I don't know if everybody can see. But just above your transfer station opening and on the backside of the bog. Well, guess where we're not going? We're not going on the backside of the bog. So essentially, a lot of that, and there's a couple little, but so if we were only gonna do some work in the spruce, we would go look a little more carefully and talk about what you say. Can you make a twitch trail? And first and foremost, the next question is what piece of equipment? Are you going to, at the town level, there are a couple of guys that still yard with horses. Like you have to be careful, that may or may not work. You don't do any wood cutting, do you, Bill? He's got plenty of other things to do. So then the next size might be like a farmy tractor. There's quite a few guys that still, I say guys, don't hold me against this. There are some women that do it. I'm so used to that. And then the next one would be like a single skidder. And then if you get to mechanical machinery, the problem is, first of all, a lot of those big spruce, if that's what we want to over mature take out, that's too big for those machines. And secondly, they need more wood to move down here. Because there is a cost of coming to the site, and it's typically round numbers. I would say when people ask me about that, it's like for each low bed they might need, it's almost $500. So how many trees do you have to cut if you're going to have to bring a harvester and then even a forwarder, which is a track machine that doesn't drag things on the ground, or a grapple skidder? So this is where the numbers game gets to be really significant. It's very hard on a really small scale, even if we properly did spruce management down here would say you clear cut an acre or a patch and then let it regeneration, because thinning might cause all the other ones to blow down. This is the tricky part. I always say that because you said you worked with that, but that's the sale. If you get to the level and we're talking to this at townspeople level, if we're gonna do something, the proper management might be to clean maybe an irregular shaped 2 acre patch in the spruce, picking up as many of the over matures as we can, but those are the trees that everybody loves, so it's a catch-22, they have value, so there's a lot going on, but I wanted you to see that's the important thing, and for each of the three things, you'll have similar ones, so if you wanna scroll, so that's species. If you scroll down to the next chart is, just go to graph 2. So I'm gonna look at these, the words I'll talk about, there's graph 2. This is your diameter distribution. There's nothing exciting about it. I was a little surprised to see heavy on the 7-inch trees, which is okay, but the rest of it's fairly normal, so nothing statistically hugely wrong, but we know that if you start at 19, 20, 20 plus, those are the big over mature trees. There is more than you get in a lot of forest, and they're all kind of clumped together. That's the way, right? So I'm looking at JW. And then the next graph,
When you look at that 7.
Yeah.
What would be the anomaly? Those are all roughly the same age, I'm guessing, right?
probably in this case they are, because the forest looks like it's growing. I don't know without going back a little deeper in the data. And this doesn't separate it by species. I could go back and look at that if we really wanted to know, were there a bunch of, was there a clump of 7 and 8 inch spruce that had filled in a gap? So we could look harder at that, but at this point, I'm just trying to do as the whole software.
Cause I was just thinking, does a fire happen, you know, that?
Well, it could have been a
wiped it out,
patch
and
that-
now
yeah.
they're all growing up in that area where that fire
Right,
was.
and it's really hard, let's be really clear, even working on a grid like this, 20 acres isn't big, and as you'll see as we move down in the stand, sometimes it only takes 2 extra trees to push that number out, because we don't have, you know, we're each of these plots we did represents about 2.5 acres.
Mhm.
But if a plot was on the edge of something like that and picked up 3 extra 7-inch trees, then it skews the data.
Okay.
But you're asking the right question, so that's good. And I'm just gonna go to the graphs, the rest that you can read between them, which talks about them. Next one is this is submergentable trees. So this is just, you can just, scroll down a little, just so we can see the species. That doesn't matter. So, of course, and we're happy there, the bright blue is spruce, which is good, as you would expect in the softwood stand. And then after that, it's pine and fir, so that's good. The only thing we don't want is fir too much, so, but there's no huge significant issue with this, is the understory was fine where it was. It's on page 19.
I'm gonna make a request. The colors are so nice. On the other hand, I think if we're printing black and white copies, you know, you can't tell. So I'm wondering if for at least like the most significant ones, you can change it to like a black and white graphic, like cross hatches or lines up or lines, horizontal lines or vertical lines. I think there are options
Oh, yeah.
in the graph to make it so that if we print it in black and white, then
Okay.
we can see, I think it might be harder.
I think I'd like to have the color though, because I like to have the PDFs in color. or
Yeah,
whatever,
that's
so
fair
you can
enough.
Create some.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah.
That if
Well,
you don't-
I know it's a bit of extra work, but
As well eventually.
if you can have like like a separate document that has the charts with the.
Well, I might be able to do that when we're done and happy with it.
Right,
Maybe I
that's
could
fine.
convert the charts in one to printable for black and white, 'cause then I can't keep switching back
Back and forth,
That makes
because
sense.
it's work.
But I like the idea. I was thinking more PDF and then people could print from home, but if you're gonna print out a few, maybe.
Like,
we can do that.
I don't have access to a color printer here.
I know, but I.
Well, that's something
I'm
should be in the budget.
Plan, other things, I need some color.
That's it for GIS.
Cross-hatch and color too.
Oh, nice.
I'll look at that. All right, I'll look at that.
That's true too.
All right.
And maybe do like paler colors and then the crosshatch shows.
All right, so, we're not gonna make a big deal about colors, but one of the things, I went to a class, because there are people that are colorblind.
Oh,
And I actually
right.
went to a thing, they're like, you should be really careful, make them very distinctive.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
I don't always do that, so let's go to the next one, but
Yep.
nothing jumped out at me there. Other than we knew it would be spruce, and it was, if you look, there's not much in the, so these are 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch going left to right. But if you really look at what we tallied, there's not a huge number, so this is where it gets deceiving, and then it's blown up to trees per acre. We're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4 as you go right, and the far right bar there is all of them added. But those are not unusual numbers. In fact, they might be a little light from a forest, so people get excited that there's 500 trees per acre, but that's really not a very big number of trees that are 1 to 4 inches. It's not a big number at all.
So you're talking just like,
Yeah, they have to
tiny
be one,
saplings.
yeah, these are, I was at a class yesterday, I learned that we're gonna call these middle school trees. Well, it was funny because it was about teaching and they're like,
Yeah.
the first draft we looked at are the adults. These are middle school. In a few minutes, we're talking about babies. I'm like, well, that makes a lot of sense, really.
well, it helps people understand, and DBH, is that,
That's diameter breast height. We'll get to that. So
Okay.
it's all trees worldwide are measured that way. If people
Are
talk.
they tall enough to be DB?
Yeah, they have to be. So and then I'll talk about it. So I guess I should have gone, we don't have
I
to go
don't
back.
wanna get into, like two.
So how I did it,
but-
we did, and I'll talk how we did the inventory, you can scroll to that graph,
Okay.
but we did a basal area factor, which is a prism, which would be hard to explain, you don't have to know 10. So you go to the plot center, you look through, and these are trees 4.6 inches and up. So the adults, if you want to call them, are mature trees that have volume. And then at the plot center, we did a fixed radius small plot for these trees, which was, I don't remember, I do different cruises on it.
Radius 1,500.
Yeah, 1.5, but every time I cruise, it's different. So 1/500 to do the tree we just looked at. So it's a fixed radius. So yes, if they don't have 0.6 diameter, they don't get counted. And so they have to be above 4.5 feet. So they have to, and we use a little tree for it, so you don't suppose you know. But you can measure different ways, but you measure. And then the third plot, which was 1/1500, is for just regeneration. That's for just the little babies that you see on the floor. You're basically standing there looking down and counting them. And the reason I inventory that way, and I thought for this side, is that, so if we do a harvest, what will probably come if we do nothing else naturally? Well, looking at that last chart, you're gonna probably get, the hope would be you get spruce, but we might want more diversity, but we don't have a lot of diversity in the softwood stand. Does that make sense? But that's why we look at everything. And then if you really weighted it out, this is the regeneration. This is the little babies, if you want to call them, on the forest floor. And then we have spruce, fir, and pine. So there's really very little hardwood. It's a closed canopy site, but this is the part that you have to explain, but does that make sense? So
Yeah.
What does mill acre mean?
mill acre is 1/1000th of an acre. And there'll be a definition in the back on that.
Or maybe a footnote, so.
Yeah, so when you look at these little smaller areas
Mhm.
and then so let's say whatever, if this is a 1 or 2 acre parcel, do you extrapolate that
Yes.
same thing to the whole thing, thinking, okay, so like when you say, oh, there's mature spruce here, is that the only place or are there some
No,
other?
so right, so we will,
Oh,
so this is, I'm just looking at how we get to where we are, and then we'll get
Right.
to the data on the full stand. So we have plot level data, which then is expanded to the forest level, and that's where you
Right,
think that you've
okay.
done it right, that we've
Alright.
done the right number. So this quickly now, this is the mixed wood stand, so now we've moved to the 15 acre stand, and if she's, I'll get a thing, so you'll see red maple. Red maple is the big bottom line, can't read my own, then red spruce, culls are third, and then balsam fir, can you scroll in a little bit? But the important thing here in this mixed wood is that I don't think anybody wants, in the mixed wood stands, red maple probably don't want to be your dominant species if you can help it, but,
Because,
well, it's not a hugely long-lived species, it's just,
like, oak is better.
oh, out of the forest would be better. I'd have to really look at the full, and like I said, I haven't done all that, but if you looked at, can you zoom in at all just on the chart? There you go. And this to the left, we don't even need to see the numbers,
Yeah.
but so now we're looking kind of at diversity, right? So we see red maple, if you work your way up through. You have pine, which is good. You have other spruce, cedar, which would be good, birch. So you have much more, there's some oak in there. So there is a lot of variety. But if we do a harvest in there, we want to make sure that we don't just replicate and have red maple come back. So if for instance, we were cutting in the mixed wood, I might be saying our goal would be, this would be first prescription before we get anywhere, would reduce the red maple, reduce the fir. We would kind of ignore the red spruce saw logs unless they're over mature, meaning they're not going to survive. But that also means instantly that whatever money you thought you'd make is now less, because now you're talking about firewood or hardwood pulpwood versus on the first stand, we were talking about spruce saw logs at board foot dollars, so it might be not worthwhile.
Not that I want to discuss it now, but I just want to place it for consideration. You know, you're right next to the transfer station. We do have the Castine wood group, right? Like we could,
Yeah.
if we were gonna take out some hardwoods, we could offer that as an opportunity for individuals who are working with that community group, maybe with some volunteers from MMA, to cut down selected specific trees
Mhm.
that could then be used for community donation. That might be a nice way to do some very small selective,
Well, aren't you gonna buy a skidder? Buy a GIS system.
Yeah, I'm gonna drive to work every day.
Track skidder.
well, maybe they've like, you know, cut it because it's good, it's gonna be, if it's gonna be used for, you know, split it there and put it on
Right.
with like a
Well, they cut it.
John Deere or something and pull it out.
They have some small scale stuff. I don't know who you have, but they do
Yeah.
have some tractors and some ways of getting it would be.
Again, if we're thinking with the concept of, in a very small scale, we're gonna demonstrate how different types of forest management actions work and how they look over time. And
So-
do it in a way that's integrated, so just,
Yes.
So when I look at this chart, I like to see this like somehow come alive and live for people, right? So I'm looking at the two bottom, the red spruce, the red maples, we were just talking about invasives, right?
Mhm.
How does that, is it the soil type, what is it that made those take over, they grow faster, therefore they starved out everything? Why are they at that number?
So I'll jump in here a little bit. So when you think about forest stand types, without major disturbance, your biggest driver is almost always your soil type. When you give things enough time, that's the main driver. So your longer species, for whatever the best soil type fit over hundreds of years, come to the front and make the stand what the stand is. When now we talk about coastal Maine, we have to understand that everything is second growth, it's regenerating. And there's a continuing factor of constant human disturbance on the landscape. So that now moves things away from, okay, it's not necessarily always soil driven now, it's disturbance driven. Was there a harvest? Was there not a harvest? And I'm recalling that stand, and I think that stand, if I remember from cruising it, was a split between the two. It's the soil type changed a little tiny bit to better favor red maple, which combined with a more frequent disturbance that happened there compared to the spruce stand pushes that stand into red maple. I also want to be very clear, red maple is not an invasive.
Right.
Red maple is one of our like most native maple species. It's just a short-lived species that doesn't often have high economic value,
Right.
which is why you sometimes look at when you see something like this, based on landowner objectives, you go, okay, if you're at least partially worried about a financial driver, seeing a lot of red maple pulpwood is not what you're looking for. It's a lot better than Japanese barberry.
But and I don't look at this all in dollar and cents, I just look at it as like bringing this forest alive, you know, and when I think about public land and we're talking about demonstrating the people how to best manage their land. And with human manipulation or whatever it.
I seem to recall a lot of those were stump sprouts.
Yeah,
Right, it means that somebody probably firewooded it back in the day.
right, and now it's that growing, right, yeah.
So, but that means you can do it again, but it goes back to kind of what Bill was talking about and the other situation. If you do that, if we worked out an operation at some point, go in and reduce the red maple pulpwood and the fir, I'm throwing the fir in because I don't like it, but if you're doing something like that and you're working out something, we have to make sure that it doesn't just stump sprout all the red maple you cut and bring it all back just at a smaller scale.
like you
So,
said, there should be a plan, like, are you actually gonna?
Right.
Community initiatives, plant oaks and ring
well,
them from
we
deer
shouldn't
or
have to
something.
plant. Typically in the forest, we wouldn't plant. We would
Okay.
we would have to just decide, are we going to add some chemicals to the stumps or what are we gonna do?
Or for an example, another example without chemical, I'm just thinking how I would build that one.
Yeah.
And I'll be very, very brief here, is like, you do a different time of year selection.
Yeah.
So you select a time of year when your leaf on, like if you had the correct ground conditions, that would be a good one to do early June.
Yeah.
When there's a lot of energy getting allocated up into the top of the tree. When you cut them at that stage, their ability to sucker a root sprout goes down drastically versus you cut them in the winter time where all their energy resources are in the root balls. I just, from my personal experience, it's like, you wanna regenerate an aspen stand, you cut it in January and you flatten the place, and 2 years later, you can't walk through it. So you're doing, you're using that biological mechanism in your favor. And as Kevin said, you leave out your white pine growing stock, you leave out your spruce growing stock to be that active seed source.
For me, this is such an interesting discussion. It's gonna be really critical that we save this, that we get this. The automatic note taking, and that it will be, to have some of this kind of discussion reflected in one or another of the reports. Will be super helpful, not only for the town, and for the specific lot, but also in giving us the material to educate property owners about how this works. Like if on somebody's property, they want to promote X or discourage Y, the time of year makes a difference. I never thought of that before.
Now down to brass tacks.
Yeah, that's-
I just wanna tie it back to the overview reports, is you don't get down to brass tacks that far, and that's where like the overall caveat is like, if you're dealing with an invasive species issue, okay, the overview report's giving you enough education to maybe you can go, oh yeah, I have a problem or I don't have a problem. It won't go to the point of, oh yeah, I mixed this chemical with that chemical.
No, of course,
That's where you go to Bill.
right, but we could have some text boxes in the overview report that provides an example of the kind of analysis, like I would cut and paste what we got in that.
If that's transcribing, I don't know.
It better be
Yeah,
transparent,
you,
yeah.
you can go through it, and read probably,
Kevin and I.
I don't know how you get it.
But no,
but that's the thing, cause I don't know what the average person thinks, like, I've been doing this so long, so I've managed
Yeah.
like. Other people's property for so long, or whatever, or community property, so when I look at that, those things just make me think, okay, there's a problem there, I'm thinking it should be more level and everything else, but the average person walking through the forest, I don't know if they look at all the little trees and think. Of these things, and that's what I want them to know, this is the value I see coming out of this. Not, otherwise it sits on a shelf, you know what I mean?
No,
To me,
yeah.
this should be actively used as a management piece for our properties and an educational thing for others to learn.
And what we're going to.
Just like your story walk thing with the plants, to me, that's what this forest should be,
Yeah, we could do something like that.
yeah.
And one of the things that I'm gonna do at the end of, once we have all the reports and the consultation, all that kind of stuff, is then pull out with a little bit of advice from you guys, and we'll have some information sheets or like a little synthesis thing that's like, okay, here's all the background documentation, and now what is it? Pull out the bits that we want people to know, and so that we do have some informational things, but
That's right,
Making it
that's what I'm
translate
saying,
better.
I want this to come alive for the layman a little bit, so it makes sense, we have a public forum, we're presenting this. I want them to see a little value, so next time they walk into the forest someplace, they remember, okay, some of this stuff, that's to me where you get some
right.
traction from.
So
So-
Bill was gonna say something, yeah, please come in.
Yeah, so in terms of making a demonstration for us, like the city of Bangor has, the university has.
Near the dump there out Stillwater, like
Right,
that one,
yep,
yeah,
exactly, yep. So those are great, and they have. All the things that you're talking about, and they're also tremendously labor intensive.
Yeah.
I've worked on both of them,
yeah,
and there's. One of them's been in the works for I don't know how many years, a long time, maybe 100 years. And the other one's, been around since like 2000, but it's a lot of work to get demonstrations going, and there's a lot of behind the scenes
Yeah.
and stuff. There's, a lot of the regions planted, a lot of the, competitive vegetation's been sprayed out or removed. It's, you need to be in there a lot with a lot of people. It is.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you.
Well, and that's why, again, we're not looking really grand, but really, could be a spot the size of this room or half the size, something just really small and specific, but that's a important.
yeah, that's true, ours is gonna be more like the redneck forest, managed forest.
No, I just say.
Yeah, I mean,
To
like,
make
right.
it, to make it effective though, you know.
Right,
You
right.
You gotta show
Gotta put some
something.
effort,
Yeah.
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 And did you have, I know you wanna say something, did you have another comment that you wanted to make earlier? Okay.
My brief comment to that, and I'd be curious to hear, hear what you think about this, is the middle ground of just, this is the plot of land, this is what we're gonna do. And when the opportunity arises and it makes sense, we talk about what we do to just inspire that cross sharing. That's the model we use at the trust. Like, I'm not necessarily planning my management around, oh, I'm gonna go do this specifically over here because I plan on taking a tour there. I think exactly the reverse. I go, that is the best thing to do on those acres, and I've done it. And some people happen to be interested, oh, I'll throw a quick tour together.
Yeah, cause I wanna have enough time to talk about
Yeah.
it.
But it's still a lot of work, but it's a
Right.
lot less work than managing something
Yeah.
like this.
I forget that's the first.
What-
Yeah, no, I agree, I think, you know, on a limited, those, I mean, it's a different scale.
Yeah.
Those forests, I think, pay for themselves,
Mm.
you know,
It's
what,
where you always hope you end up at the end of the day.
you know, what, even if it isn't monetary for
Yeah.
wood, because of course wood is worth.
What it used to be.
It's not.
Of course, well, and I was gonna say, so one of the things, I don't know, I was watching some movie like about knights or something, and they drive, of course, they're riding their horses through the forest, through the treed areas. And there's no underbrush or anything in there, so like everything's dead, and I'm like,
Well,
are
that's the
those
European-
managed forests? Are those like, cause I've never walked into a raw Maine forest, like, and not had slashes all over me and everything else, you know?
That's
So I
the,
just
that's the European model.
You can
Right.
get that in upper New York State in cherry heavy forest, where it'll close it and make it grass. I
Yeah.
did some cruising over there quite a few years ago, and I was like, I mean, literally, when you could look, you know, if you're used to Maine, and then you can look at
Right.
your compass and go, oh my God, I can see a quarter of a mile.
Right.
And then that's where you were going.
There are
Right.
some old reports, you know, Colonial Explorer reports of some areas in Maine where people could come in with their horses and ride.
You look like Gilead
Whether
in that
that-
old.
whether that was-
Big heavy pine stand, you
Right.
get that.
You still
Yeah.
can, like, you know, it's gone, except some of your riparian zones, some
Yeah.
areas where people can't get to, if you go through. Some of those, especially heavy hemlock,
Yeah.
you can get stands that are absolutely. You
Dense,
couldn't, you couldn't make them that nice.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know, you
And then you have to be really careful. But I have a client that in Amherst that has 500 or 600 acres, but they have a big stand of closed hemlock that's been there. They wanted to cut it, but it's not really any good market. But literally, you're right. You probably, if you were a horse person, you could meander your way around without a trail. But they're few and far between, not like they used to be. But you're right, because when you open up the canopy, then all these other things grow in, and then you
Yeah.
crawl around like we're used to.
Yeah,
So we'll have that. Well, this, I know that we're.
yeah, sorry, Phil was gonna make another comment.
Okay,
and then-
go ahead, jump on.
Actually, I have.
Yeah, I know you've got so much to do,
And
yeah.
I do, and I apologize.
Yeah.
It's all right.
Thank you, and I
Yeah.
guess if, I don't know if you have time to do further reviews as we move along, but we can love to continue
We
having.
can talk with neighbors.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did
All
down the
good.
road for me.
Okay,
Thanks,
great.
Bill.
Thank
Nice
you.
to see
Thank you, sorry to.
No, that's all right.
It's got, it is
Yeah,
way
it's getting
past
late.
when I
I
said
know.
that.
Okay,
Thank you so
Nice
much.
to meet you.
Thank you.
all right.
So
So we're gonna go through
sorry,
these.
JW had a,
No, I mean.
JT had a, okay.
So we're gonna go through charts a little quicker now because we're closer on time,
Yeah.
minus that other thing. So this is mixed wood diameter.
Yeah.
This is more regular, what you'd expect. Don't worry about the weird blips, but this is a more shape what you would expect,
Okay,
all right?
and what's the
Nothing's-
5 on the bottom? Oh, these are inches at the
They're
bottom,
inches, those are
Okay.
inches, so when
Yeah.
it says 5, it's 4.6 to 5.5.
all right. Yeah.
So there, it's block.
If you can just add like inches or the little.
Oh, I thought it said it on the right, don't worry about it, all that stuff will get fixed.
Yeah.
But okay.
Yeah,
Might-
that's right,
All right, we'll get there.
minor.
The next one, if you scroll, this is, we did before, these are the submergible or teenagers or trouble trees, whatever you wanna call them. We'll fix the coloring, nothing hugely unusual there. We did find a little oak, which is nice. The rest of them are pretty much standard, fir being the big number, unfortunately. Other hardwood, I'd have to go back and look, meaning it was probably a non-commercial species, but the red maple, like I said, we try to eliminate. The next one, if you scroll, will be seedlings, which is a little bit heavier to red spruce and the mixed wood, which is nice. That means possibly if we open up the sunlight, they might get ahead of the other, but you gotta be really cautious. When we talk about this stuff, when he talks about labor intensive, even if you don't do something like Bangor Forest, and we wanna do it right. You still gotta go back and look, cause we think we did everything right, we cut at the right time. And then for whatever reason, the spruce didn't take off and the red maple decided it wanted to be boss again, and then it filled back in, so. I'm talking about on a small scale thing, you still have to look, even if you're not doing anything. As the town, you either go or you send the forest or you send Bill or somebody goes out and says. Oh, we did all this, we thought we were right on, it doesn't always go the way you thought, so that makes
Can
sense.
I ask one quick question about when you're doing that? If it's not merchantable or anything else, and you've been part of, and even the trust of managed forestry or whatever. Is it okay to leave those, just drop them on the ground, just so they open up that canopy? I
Yes.
know you might have to tell people, yeah, sorry, that's going to waste, but it's a bigger reason for that, you know?
That's what we call pre-commercial thinning, that's something we'll talk about later, but.
Okay.
If you wanted to only work in those, that's something you would do, but that is always a money cost. Nobody's doing
Right,
commercial, 'cause there's
exactly.
the key, there's no commercial wood involved with it, even if it's low grade. But pre-commercial work, a lot of the time it's done with a brush saw. But you could, I don't know if you have enough of it to do that, but you could, if you're looking at small scale, if we could find the right thicket. If you had a thicket with the red maple over the spruce that you wanted, you could go in and remove it, like you said. Part of what you're talking about is making sure the townspeople know why you did what you're doing.
Yeah,
And that they might say, oh, I'd like to do that on
Yeah,
my
I
property.
think at the end,
Right,
I think
that's-
at the end of the day, the process, I think the stars finally aligned for me this week and really got the click that you've been trying to get me to get for a while. You're really just I don't wanna say we're just going through the motions, cause we are doing active planning. But we're trying to, above and beyond, correct me if I'm wrong, talk about the active planning we're doing to give some level of education to the town. So there's not necessarily a level of buy-in, but then there's a added level of understanding about when they go out on their back 40.
Yeah,
To go, oh, I have something similar to what was talked about in one of these documents, or what was it shown in one of those documents, and then they might care enough to then go do something.
and, or we might have, learn about thinning, learn about X session. And have people practice that for 2 hours on one of these properties.
Yeah.
Maybe we get 6 people or whatever, and they're interested in coming back, as you said, to their own, well, having had some of that experience. Oh, this isn't that difficult. Oh, here's how I identify what I'm looking at. Oh, here, let me try this in this segment of my back, whatever.
well, and I look at it as like from the perspective. I grew up as in a mill state, okay, where forestry was king, and I don't think the new generations actually get that as much. That they can just conserve,
Okay.
not manage. So they gotta cut down all these trees for a new power line, right? Or the clear cutting. I remember the 1A, 1B, 1C
Yeah.
forestry compact, all that stuff, and I'm thinking. That seems so far in the past now. And now, so I'm just saying we have something that I think we could manage the right way.
Yeah,
Show
oh, good.
I love to remind people that conservation technically means wise use.
I
Right.
keep scrolling, so I
But
know.
a lot
I'm
of
trying to
people
leave
think
some
it just
time.
means, oh, don't touch it.
But
So just for quickly, this is the hardwood stand, which is a small, this is only like 5 acres. So this is harder, even though you'll see red maple is the big one on the bottom, followed by culls. That's really that's the part that jumped out to me, was the amount of culls in all of the forest, and culls are non-merchantable, they're great for birds, let's not be wrong about this, but. They have no commercial value, so you can't really go collect them, and most of these tend to be what we call standing stubs. That's why they get picked up. These aren't on the ground already, but they're standing and they just don't have any value except for wildlife and birds. But it just, you don't wanna look at this and find it's the second or third level of your graph,
So
unfortunately.
they're dead trees, are
They're standing dead trees essentially.
standing dead or in a degraded state. From a solid or pulpwood perspective, that there is no commercial
Right.
product.
And
It's more.
what,
You
and,
don't say those gotta go off our roadside.
And
Can I give two quick?
Sure, jump
Yeah.
in.
Because,
Yeah.
because I think as a conservation forester, I think about culls in two very different ways. I
Okay.
think about culls in the sense that Kevin's talking about of, is there a commercial product, yes or no? If the answer is no, there is no commercial product, it goes in as a cull. But wildlife, what we always were taught with wildlife, maples, which is the other one Kevin's talking about, those also fall into two drastically different categories. Is you might have a big gnarly red maple that is twisted up, has big rot seams through the center of it, has limbs sticking off in weird angles, is more than half dead, that goes in as a product cull regardless, because there's no solid, you can't make anything out of that tree. But then has an incredible wildlife value, has an incredible ecological value. So from an ecological standpoint, it's one of your most valuable trees. That is very, very different from a 6-inch balsam fir that's hollow with no commercial product in that, because that tree also has virtually no long-term ecological value.
Well, I tell my wife all the time, she cuts down that half-dead tree, then I'm not gonna see that beautiful woodpecker out there.
That's a great, and I
Bang, bang, bang,
will,
bang, 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 and she hates that sound after a while, to me, I block it out.
all right,
Yeah.
so that will, I don't want to keep going, so
Sorry, I didn't mean to
no, that's
cut you
okay,
off.
no, that's good.
I mean, well, and actually, I'm intervening with a question. So with this 23% of hardwood as calls, or things that should be called,
Mhm.
why is that so high?
We're-
That's a different question.
I wanna clarify with Kevin
Yeah.
before I maybe try to answer the question. With this, we're talking just roundwood merchantability.
Yeah, so these were trees that had to be, so these are stems, I don't wanna call them trees in here that. Cause he did the cruising, now I did on the other one and the other one, but he's looking through the glass. And it's bigger than 4.6 inches, so it's counted. So it's taller than that, so he looks at it, he's gonna go, you see the species. Balsam fir, red maple, whitebird, so let's say it's the red maple. So he's looking at that red maple and it's more than 4.6 inches. Then he's gonna go, oh, but it's a cull, and then he graded them. Which I didn't put in here, but he graded them, so is that what you wanted to do?
So
Yeah,
the
so-
reason why you might not want them is that you can't sell them, not that they're not
Yeah,
valuable.
that's
right,
like, that's what
I'm not
that
talking about the
okay,
wood,
we're not
this is-
talking about ecological value,
Got
we're
it.
talking
Thank you.
about
And we'll try to be a little clearer.
what can go to the yard.
Yeah, yeah.
But the other problem, the other point that I will throw out there is you talked about maybe doing a harvest. Who and what would do it? If we're doing your small scale thing that we're talking about, let's say we can find. Smaller than a skidder, and the reason I'm going this route for what you're talking about, a skidder is 9-foot wide trailish, 8. What's the smallest?
Yeah, you're
I'm talking,
eight, but
Eight,
9
eight.
is realistic.
so
Nine.
that's your trail path to get through the woods, you're gonna have to, that's gonna open up. Farm tractor, 4 to 5 feet, a horse. Couple of feet, if we can find them, okay? But then as you go down, the stumpage goes down, I mean, because they're more manpower to do it. But what I'm getting at is that as you get into these smaller equipment, dead standing snags become a problem. Because they're not supposed to cut them. Because they're dead standing snags, I'm talking about law, not saying they wouldn't, but legally they're not supposed to. Because they're not supposed to be close to them, so. That's where they're standing in the forest and maybe you don't notice them, because you might look at them, it may still have a crown, but the back of it might be hollow. That's why it doesn't make it as a commercial tree, but it's still fine for wildlife and ecological. So it's a catch-22. I'm not trying to discourage you, but I'm trying to describe,
Right.
we'll try to get all this information.
And it might be that, I mean, it's a little. Maybe this comes out at the end rather than after each discussion here, but like the so what, like that's. I know that the standard report is about, can you sell the wood or not and so forth, but really it makes it seem here as though, oh, we've got 23% like dead trees or too small trees or,
These are
you know,
dead, or
20 foot,
dead,
10 foot
dead.
stumps,
Yeah.
and that's really, it's more interesting to know, I mean, from a fire perspective.
Yeah.
If we had 25% dead trees in there standing up, that would be like really a problem. And
Maybe not.
Maybe not, so I'm eventually you can say that, but when everything I've learned, and we'll have a
Yeah,
section on
yeah.
fire is.
okay,
What the first thing they'll tell you if you come as a landowner for fire, it's
Right.
the underbrush
it's the
shrub, it's
underbrush
not,
underground,
it's
okay.
none of the standing stems that we're talking about here.
Okay.
Initially, then they'll get on to the next level will be if the tree could fall and hit your house, that's second level, but first level is essentially nothing that we're talking about here.
Okay,
in this.
And I don't
And
wanna
not-
derail the
and not-
discussion, but
I don't know how much, like, I got a couple friends of mine, they all Great Pond, Aurora, Amherst, they got some big stands up. They have these big harvesters and they do grapple, they
Yeah,
cut
yeah.
them, but then they also have the thing that just chews trees down
Yeah.
right to the stump, and they told me they're thinning out what they don't want in some cases in that.
Did you ask them how much that cost?
I have no idea there.
You don't want to know, we're talking about, I think last I heard, $350 an hour to.
Really, yeah. Well, I think they own the machines and the land. so
They do, no, that's
themselves.
fine, but I'm just
Yeah,
pointing out.
but that's what I was thinking of when you're
Yeah.
talking about thinning out, that's what they were
Yeah.
telling me when I'm like, why'd you just grind that down to nothing? They're like, cause I don't want it in my stand.
Those are
Or
great,
whatever.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
another long story.
Right.
And they make those, you can put them on front of like, how do you call it, like Bobcat machines?
Yeah,
But then, even then, it's even worse because it not only has to hit the tree of that, if you're trying to do that. The one you saw was on an excavator arm and it's much more articulated, and they can really essentially just.
cut them and saw like.
On the tree right
Yeah,
down.
right, yeah, and then.
we got 20 minutes.
Sorry, we don't know.
It's right, do you have,
So nothing there, that's just DBH again, didn't turn it, because now we're having a 5 acre stand, probably had 2 plots in, I think is what it was, so. This is where numbers become a problem, that you don't get quite enough data, we're not skewing submersible, pretty much same species, nothing exciting or unexciting there. So I think the hardwood. And for location, it's on the back stand, so I just wanted you to see, there's what we found for number. This is the whole forest together, so this one might matter, this is. I won't describe basal area, but the idea, doesn't matter how you figure it out, but if you look at the chart, red spruce, as you would imagine. The biggest stand driving everything else, so as a forester, red spruce is fine, we have to go back to all the diameter charts and go. Do we have too many open shore? That's a separate thing. Balsam fir and then the red maple. And then everything else is not a bad percentage in my mind, whether we could ever increase as much as you, forget the black cherry for a minute, that's not really something to speak of, but cedar, tamarack. Probably not white spruce, but red oak, yellow birch, white birch, sugar maple, which is hard maple,
it
all of
would,
those would be better.
it would be interesting to see a comparison of, here's what we're looking at in this one area. And compared to a similar chart for your stand typing exercise, knowing that that's rough, and maybe it's not. I don't know that it's by basal
I could do
area,
something, I
but-
could do an example, I could make up a plot, a single fixed radius plot and work up an example.
and I guess when you say plot, you mean a graph chart? No, you mean
And a sample point in the forest.
but I guess what I'm wondering is what the average is across,
Average of what?
do
You want this with
species across,
species to
like
diameter?
maybe do it.
So you want, Kevin, can I borrow a piece?
Because it would help us to understand how representative.
I think I've got it,
Alright.
it'll be quicker if I just get a little quicker.
Yeah.
And I snag all, is the red
Yeah.
red or is the red black?
It's red.
Perfect, and can I have it highlighted?
Sure.
Are you color, are you color?
No, because, well, you know, some pens, they're the color, but then the ink isn't the same.
What else you want my hand?
No,
I mean, I think,
Always drawing, well, you work
okay,
on
go
that.
ahead.
A quick question.
Yeah,
As far as the culls are concerned, you can identify a species of a dead tree?
Mostly.
Really?
Oh, yeah, so,
No leaves on it?
no, so not always.
Underneath it?
Yeah, you do a little bit of everything. You
Yeah.
have to figure out what's around, what's on the ground.
Yeah.
But I think that this is gonna be harder to explain. I have to really go back to the actual data, but like, let's take a red maple stem. Let's say it's 20 feet tall. But it probably has maybe no live crown, maybe 5 branches, so it's still actually alive. It's got a big seam up the side. Pulpwood's a little harder because pulpwood can cover a lot of ground. You can take a lot of wood in, but it might have a hollow back, like a fir might have nothing on the backside. So that's the judgment call for the forester that's on the location site. But there's no doubt that if it's totally dead, is it red spruce or was it white spruce?
Yeah.
You may get it wrong, but you know for what's around you. So it's still a math
It's an
game,
estimate, yeah.
it's still an estimate, and you do the best job you can.
Since it's probably the magical powers there coming out.
that's not,
Well, you go with that, that's my son, while he's working up the grass.
that's not super realistic, but the tenants are roughly there.
Oh,
That type of ground. So what you're looking at is color code is species,
right,
the bottom is diameter, and the top is a metric of density. So you can use TPA or basal area. I like them as basal areas.
okay.
Is that
chart
what you
right there.
can, so if, yeah, so that,
This is the chart you just drew?
yeah, that would be the chart I just drew.
Yeah, so the black line is trees per acre. And then so if you look at this, sorry, I didn't know where we were
I
going.
didn't know.
So if you look at the far left is red spruce. And what we're looking at for the red spruce, the green is what we call acceptable growing straw. Saw logs, veneer logs, quality wood.
How about pilings?
That pilings would fit in that, but the red, and this is why it will matter, the red would be what we call unacceptable growing stock, pulp or maybe even culls.
Yeah.
So your red spruce is fine, and I think we all could have known that from the beginning. I could have told you that walking down the trail, any forest or whatever. So let's go right. Let's go over balsam fir, heavy red, but we don't want balsam fir really anyway. And then the next one is white pine. That's not too bad. And then we come to the red maple. So what we would be looking at if we ever were to do something, this is the entire forest, is reducing the red, meaning the unacceptable growing stuff, pulp of red maple. Now, we probably wouldn't cut any red maple that's considered green. That might be a pallet log, or it might be a tie log. So that, but what you really want to do is, and this forest is not bad in that regard, but this is what you were looking for.
What I'm interested in is how representative this analysis is of the Bog Brook area overall.
Ooh.
Knowing that there's a lot of difference, right? But because we can talk to word.
And I would say it isn't, it all depends. You've got some landowners that probably haven't done anything major in 40 to 50 years, and in broad strokes, it's probably not unrepresentative of those landowners. And then I think you have a couple landowners in the Bog Brook area that are managing quite intensely, quite wisely, where this may or may not be a good representation.
Yeah.
It all depends on their objectives.
Right. No, I appreciate that, but just about like when we say we've got too much of X and not enough of Y, or the quality of X here is not so good, but we've got really good quality of X, in a dozen other places. I'm just, and we don't have time to kind of talk about it, but I'm just interested in how we bridge how we're talking about a specific stand to how we talk about what we have all across. If the whole Bog Brook area was one place that you're looking at, right? You got an awful lot of everything.
That's the problem, though. It's
Yeah.
not. It's a natural system. You cross a drainage and go on to another landowner on another soil type, and things are drastically going to change. It's just the nature of forests.
Of the area. Okay.
That's interesting, cause I noticed there's no red pine, so I'm guessing
No,
they
yeah,
don't
no.
like it around.
This one just quickly doesn't
whatever,
matter
right?
much, but this is what we call crown position. So we're talking about the blue is the overtopped, which means totally in the shade, essentially intermediate is reaching in. So it's the yellow on the right. We should go that way. Dominant, big trees on the top. Dominant and co-dominants are good. So if you're looking at the red spruce, you can see obviously it's the king trees out there. The one that I would jump out is if you jump to the red maple, co-dominant means those are probably the ones that would be your firewood trees that would come out. You would reduce that because red maple isn't big what you want. And then if you looked at the balsam fir, you can see the number wise, these are not directly numbered, but the balsam fir, it's on the overtop, they're in the shade already, but they don't die in the shade all the time. So you've got to be cautious of that. And that's really all of this. This is just a very simple way of looking at them. Crown position, people sometimes like to know, sometimes don't, but I like to throw it in. This stuff is still working. There's really nothing else after the graphs other than little things that I was making notes
No,
of.
this is really interesting, and I think it would be very helpful if you were able to provide a paragraph underneath this that kind of states the so what part that you've just explained.
Okay.
And also put some of it into, or provide clarifying lay language.
Okay.
And I know maybe, glossary at the end, like overtopped means, X, Y, and Z. I mean, on the one hand, you're doing a professional forester report,
Right.
and we don't need to, but in order to allow us to translate that into something that lay people can understand and that we'll be able to present in August,
Okay.
that will be able to provide that explanatory.
I wanna say it, so I don't forget to follow up with you.
Okay.
I have it, it's gonna be, I'm gonna need to find it.
Okay,
I think it's Woodwise has
okay.
a several page definitions already built, but they intend foresters to just cut and paste. I think it's them. But I don't
I'd have to, we'll talk about it. Okay, but I made a note of
Thanks,
that. Okay.
yeah.
Yep.
So you
I
don't have
understand
to
that, and like I said, I
reinvent the
wanted to be really clear that this was, I wanted to get, well, I know your timeline, but we're trying to keep to it, it's hard, but. For me, this big part of today was what we just covered.
Yeah.
We finished in the field, we're looking at the graphs, which are easier for people to understand, and you can go back and read it, it talks about what the graphs in a little more detail, but it describes all those. But the rest of the stuff here is too vague to be really anything yet, but it was good to hear what you had to say. So what's gonna happen is we're gonna get, the second one is draft, which will be very similar to the first one, the numbers will be slightly different. Obviously, the graphs will be all entirely different, but it's not hugely different, I've been on both.
Sure,
And then the third one will come, none of this is coming next week, we have the holiday, but I'm on the Tree Farm National Tour, I'll be gone for the week, but. After that, after the 4th, during that first week, they'll start coming like first draft of the transfer station, then the first draft of Hatch is what I'm hoping for. Hatch will be totally different.
right,
Hatch is their property, but it is so different, there's not a.
Yeah.
One spruce tree on it, it's all really junk, but it's gonna be more important, I think, to this, bringing it back to the people, it's gonna be more what they see in their backyard. Than that spruce stand that we're enjoying and talking
Yeah.
about whether you should cut a spruce that's.
well, and I also wonder whether we should not seek to create a, a healthy, solid forest there, the Hat Cove area, but
That's their choice.
I don't know, I don't know.
That's his court.
But no, like, but this is what I
That's
want
even
to
above, that's
understand.
even above my pay grade.
No, I know, but like, I mean, if it's so far gone and it's full of apple trees, like, should it be a recreate, like there, it's like, is it really making,
With
what
Hat-
contribution is it
Hat
making?
Cove, the story is going to be an invasive species, and when you start talking about invasives. There's kind of an order of operations that's generally followed.
Yeah,
Of where you allocate your effort, because as you're
This is the trend.
past, I'll just use the word past to talk about. Invasive terrestrials is what we're talking about.
Yes.
As that load
You
increases,
this trend.
the necessary investment, both work like on the ground, or financial investment to deal with that problem
Which road?
exponentially increases up to a plateau.
Which.
So if you're in
Yeah, and there's.
what I call little tiny micro spots, like I found one on my land that was spring and scared the shit out of me, except it was one stem of winged Uranus burning bush.
You wanna hold it?
Okay.
Or you-
That's the hard to detect, but once you've detected it, that's
Yeah.
5 minutes to deal with that problem.
Okay.
Almost zero financial investment, very little time was dealt with a set of gloves that you did. I might not have gotten it all, but I significantly, there were other factors there that made me feel confident that's the.
Yeah.
Versus you look at like driving up the Dunbar Road from Scott.
Yeah.
Where right now I have to roll up my windows because the scent of multi-floor roads makes me
Yes.
anxious.
I think, yeah,
I
yeah,
hate the smell of it, and I think it's
What is
partially a psychological thing, because I'm going so bad, but
And-
the sickeningly sweet smell makes me.
and I think it's all been spread, I was just noticing it myself, from the 5 bushes and from that old house.
Yep.
And all up and down the road for a quarter mile.
Well, you probably
It's-
should.
it's-
So now, if you look at that, that's up in the top of the expected zone. Your goal may never be eradication, because you can't manage it, your goal is to hold the line. So find where the infestation
Maybe
is,
you might
draw a circle
Yeah,
around
yeah,
it,
just
and
like-
hold the line.
Well, that's-
that.
Hatch Cove is, I think, it'll get Kevin and Ron lament.
Okay.
Hatch Cove probably
So this
this
is
is
what-
the average
this is-
landowner, we're gonna
Yeah.
use it as a softly site, and it wasn't land trusting land, but it wasn't. We don't own Hatch Cove for its ecological value, we own we own Schumacher for its historical value.
And that's what I wanna bring up for debate, if it's for historical value, it's an old fort, yet another old fort site. Maybe it should be
All
like
the report, all
apple
the will be
trees
in there
and-
eventually.
grass and that's it. Like, unless there's a real species archaeological, you know, species reason not to do it. Like you guys saw the bear scat
Or
or
you're,
something.
or you're just from development, but if we use a similar site to that in the in the private sector. As an example of what would you recommend, that might be one where you just look your client in the eyes and go,
This is
you
what,
ready to spend $100,000?
Yeah.
Because they're gonna say no.
right,
Okay, then this is what you can start to do at a low cost level that is functional, hold the line.
yeah. I,
It's hard with natural resources. I think I just wanna kind of bring everybody back to just this one big thing. It's so hard when you're talking about forest systems, field, rangeland systems, ocean systems. Because they're naturally always in a high state of flux.
right,
They're naturally extremely diverse and we just do not have the ability to understand every component of them and they don't replicate themselves 100% very often. There's always a nuance that is slightly different. So it's hard to talk about, as you say, like, is Greenby representative of the Bog Brook area? In some ways, yes.
well, and I know it's not, and therefore not fully, in terms of percentages and stuff like that, but it's an example. And we want to, I'm wondering if there's a way to couch how we talk about it, because we're doing a site-specific analysis with artificial boundary lines, but at the same time, we know it's very integrated within the whole.
I think we talk about the
Yeah.
process, because I think the process, correct me if I'm wrong, the process of how we are going about this, how this group is going about this. And the educational component of that is the selling point to the town.
Yes.
And that's the
Yeah.
replicatable piece was
Yeah.
why Kevin
Yeah.
picked a different cruise.
Right.
Because there's a couple different ways
Ways
to
to
take
go about doing
data,
things, yeah.
but you functionally do the same thing every time.
And there's also, I'd like to have an annex, and maybe you can help me write it, but that really speaks to process. This was something that Hans, when we had one of our first meetings, asked, you know, can we really document what you are doing here in terms of this whole kind of community-centered approach, or however, whatever we want to call it, whatever it is that we're doing with this thing. That we include a section on that, and that'll be part of like our report back too. But
If you go to, and we don't maybe even time to do it now, if you go to the overview report, I added the other time, section 10. Maybe that is what we're both talking about, just see if
Great.
what I started with jumble in there makes general sense, and if it doesn't, we can exit, and my feelings will definitely not be hurt.
okay,
Can I ask a question? So
quick-
over behind like Dunk's Meadow,
quick
right?
question, are we gonna
Before
get,
you get to the main pond in the middle, right? You have all kinds of trails and everything, looked like it was harvested or something and it's been managed, but maybe those are just other things. But when I look at it, it looks
Oh,
like
that's
this all little trail. It's in behind, like whatever, and if you look at the aerial,
That's
you
a
can
Blackwood's
see
house.
all of those. Is that because
That
he's
is
been
the family has different
managed
plots
it
in
for
there,
years?
several years ago, they had them.
Okay,
They
that,
got all kinds of stuff in there.
okay,
Um,
so, cause that looks like what I'm using for harvest.
Derek, are we gonna get kicked out
Well,
in?
so this.
No,
minute and a half?
no,
Okay.
until like kill it, most likely.
Okay.
No, that's good.
Because I wanna make sure that we can
Yeah,
get the
Patches
best.
have one
Oh, there's
been
no guarantee that's holding it. I
We're
don't know,
not-
she's got it on set.
apple orchard that was then let go.
Sorry, who's holding it?
I think,
You know, you have these apple trees
It may
spawning
be
all
people
through the
that close
place.
There is, they are all through, I thought we found where there was a
That-
cellar.
It may have been a little apple.
Video.
I would have,
I don't
that or
think
just
necessarily
a small farm that did,
I'll have to
had some
look
apple
and see
trees
that.
around, clearly, yeah. Well, I think it was.
So it was
apple
just
and-
let go, it was.
Yeah, never. was.
Maybe.
apple trees, when you find them, I
Or on
find
YouTube,
way in
maybe,
the
too.
interior sometimes.
Yeah.
And we would always associate them where if you started, like, if you were in northern Penobscot County. Doing big forestry work and you ran into an apple tree, there is some major human disturbance close by.
Yeah.
And the number one thing I always found is there was an old camp. You were standing on an old camp and sometimes they are flattened to the point where they are incredibly difficult to find, but if you know what to look for, you'll be like, yeah. There was no dug foundation, but there are the old log footers and that's the only thing that's left. And they're covered, the forest is basically reclaimed the site.
Yeah.
But the thing that you can easily identify is there was an old declining apple tree in a spruce fir forest that does not actually.
That was there, so they could make some moonshine while they were there.
Or you wanted to can apples when you're gonna get ready to spend the winter in there. And then you start kicking around and, digging up, kicking around duff layer, it's like, oh, there's the top of the stove, and I found the dump. I love finding old dumps.
All the
Old
glass
dumps.
dumps.
I bet
Old
those are
bottles,
like,
Yeah,
right,
all bottles, really old stuff.
Because it used to be main law that if you had a settlement, you could have a personal dump.
Mhm.
And you just.
We had one on the back shore at our cottage when my father started expanding the lawn, we came across the dump.
Found it.
I think it, I
The
think.
dominant bottle,
And what was
Pepto-Bismol.
That's just sad.
That's a boring bottle.
Exactly.
I like the poison bottles, those are the
Oh,
ones that have the rough surface on them. So like when you get up in the middle of the night, you're looking for the Pepto-Bismol rather than the rat killer, you go, okay, that one's the rat killer, this is the
All
mess.
they had to do was shift it on the shelf, and spend how much they liked you.
So these are, it says you can
I-
save cash.
Yeah, I don't know if
No, no,
it is on there.
even if it wasn't started at the beginning of the meeting. So we have to follow these instructions.
Settings, enable, yeah, but see where it says to ensure the setting is enabled,
No, but it says even if they weren't started at the
I
beginning.
tried to look.
then before the meeting ends.
What surprise, it usually-
Yeah.
So, let's try that.
I don't know how to get in on settings from
All right,
here.
you'll see it happening window.
Well, no, I don't think it's in
Yes.
this part of it, it's in the other part of it.
Yeah, okay.
So that would be.
And are you thinking that the data we've already sent to him, he could just make it that way?
He told me there's an extension, there's.
Okay.
Well, it's a button that creates.
I'll tell him that's what we're gonna do.
Because I think in order. You ever seen that?
Oh, yeah.
I think that-
Oh, I really.
So many things that are still like that I'm.
Is it the FBS? You do the actual where it looks like you, yes, I've seen that.
Turn my attention to something else and unless I do.
Done a lot of that in the old stuff that was on them, but I've seen it before. I just,
Yeah.
so.
So it's like, how do you do that? How do you do that?
Right.
I'm going in, I was having lunch, but now there's a lot of things. And I expect that, so I still have to work, but that's why I was like, this is a good start, but I will ask him about that, like I said, either tomorrow or when I get back, so.
And if not, I can take. the-
Yeah, don't spend any time on that while until we know for sure one way or the other.
I will wait to hear from him.
Yes, that would be perfect.
Because honestly.
Did you say you sent it me the stuff this morning?
Essentially,
That was this morning, okay. And
10 years ago.
we can wait a little depending on what you wanna do.
That
Yeah.
never passed.
I don't know if there's any, well, you can't do maps on Bangor, right?
That sort of thing, and like.
That's fine, cause I did talk to somebody else and,
Tell me, just tell me if you like the data or not.
yeah, I'll look at that. Yep.
But,
Did I ask you to, I know I asked Malcolm to
you know.
remember what you did and just write me a paragraph or two. when you did that. All right, I'll look at that tonight when I get home and then I leave Sunday morning, so if you don't hear from me, I'll be back.
Right across the station.
Like you need, like you need more stuff.
Well, my personality apparently is gonna be.
Okay.
But that is very similar to where, you know, our edge was 66 days.
I think absolutely that they want them to.
Yeah.
Combine some.
Well, very interesting. Well, it would be great to have your,
I think you.
my transition
If they
to
wanted to do enough, maybe, yeah.
having these reports done, and going into the public meeting.
I'm just thinking,
Show.
You know,
Show.
show-
Two.
How do we
three
make-
Groups they're gonna.
we have-
well, they're all gonna, yeah.
Financially spells out, this is our, maybe all the spruce, stump edge.
What about
and then hardwood is done
Where is
contract
that,
rate.
is it gonna get addressed?
Because essentially-
Report or not report that we're doing it?
Oh.
So that might be like an advantage, yeah, there's a little ways to look at it.
You know, I'll invite you next time.
The things, yeah, those are the things that sometimes you don't have, that you don't always get.
Well, that's the thing that drives your price.
And there's a couple other people.
But in this case, you could, but then it's like the story about the salt.
It's interesting.
And meetings.
That's even with the forester involved, so I just think that happened where things are moving in that direction and it just all falls apart, so we'll see. All right, are we set or is something you have, or, we got lots of things to do.
We
I
have
see
much
that.
to do. Thank you for taking the whole morning. And
I think the overview report, and now that I think I have a better understanding of what you and the town want for the overview report.
okay,
I feel a lot better about it because I know the level of I'm writing to and I would say the overview report, like the plan Kevin's writing, the specificity, this is higher and which means you can write quicker.
right.
And that's why I wanted us to be on the.
I think the overview
It's
report will come quickly. I'm just getting concerned about timeline.
Yeah.
Really, like it's July actually.
Right.
Essentially, and then
Yeah.
you're talking about August 5th meeting, and what
And we
level
can-
do you expect
we
to have
can-
them at August 5th?
Well, I mean, we need to, you know, we have to submit this stuff in September. But I mean, we don't need to have completed reports on the table to hand out to everybody. What we need is to be able to summarize, figure out what level of information we provide in 20 minutes. We probably have some handouts and we summarize some of our findings and recommendations. And then we spend 40 minutes probably we do something similar to what we did before. We have a facilitator, we have people in groups asking questions and maybe we can be pretty directive about, or at least partially directive on what feedback we want. And a lot of that is kind of, it's less about what do you, the townspeople, think we should do, it's more about what information would be useful to you.
Your thing disappeared, so I.
Oh, okay, sorry.
All right, that's helpful.
So I don't know where that was, I'm having trouble finding.
Hang on.
Here, I can't, well, I remember Senate Beats, so that's good. There you go.
Where you are.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you.
Alright, gotta go back to the office and hook up to a 26-foot trailer to take some equipment to get it fixed because
Well, it's